Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Philly Old Head Review. Today we have a returning guest, Miss Dacia Moore. And today our subject or the topic that we're going to talk about is parenting. Very diverse topic. And we hope to make this into a series and talk about the different aspects of parenting. So today we're just going to touch on some basic aspects of parenting. And without further ado, Miss Dacia Moore.
Hey, good morning, Omar, and good morning to you, our listening, our watching audience. We're going to talk about parenting. It's often said that there are no instruction manuals that come with your children, and that is true, although there is a lot of really good research and data out there that can help you. And so I want to talk about a couple of myths of parenting. First off, I'm a licensed professional counselor. I have a private practice in Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm also the executive director of a women's counseling and life coaching nonprofit here in the Midwest. I have 2 young adult daughters and 2 grandsons. So I have parented from infancy to young adults. Both of my children or daughters are in their 30s. And so I do have some expertise because one of the myths, or I don't know if it's a myth, but it's a belief that is, I believe, false. And a lot of times we don't even know it, but we often parent the way we were parented. Okay.
Right.
We take our cues from our nuclear family. So whomever you were raised by, your mother, your father, your grandparents, even if you said, I am never going to say that to my kids, I'm not doing that. No. It is. Now, Omar, let me ask you this question. Have you ever had the experience that you said that exact thing, but years later, when you had kids, you found words coming out of your mouth that sounded like your mother or your father?
I don't think I ever said that I wouldn't say a particular thing, maybe not do a particular thing, and probably found myself parroting or repeating that same thing my parent or that which I was shown when I was younger. So yeah, pretty much you have your moments as a parent.
Yes.
You know, so yes. Yeah.
So that's really the foundation of our parenting, is the way that we were parented. That's the model that we have. But the problem that I ran into when I was raising my children is that my oldest daughter is nothing like me. So the parenting that I learned from my mom was for somebody like me. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, was the opposite. And I struggled with parenting her because what I was doing, fussing, yelling, spanking. I believe in corporal punishment. I don't believe in leaving marks, but I do believe in the paddle, and that it's called negative reinforcement. When you have enough pain, you're not going to do that again. But those things didn't work on her, and that began my journey probably when I tell you, this is what happened. I was spanking her one day, and she turned around and looked at me as in a very defiant look, as if no matter how much you spank me, I am not going to cry. And she is a very, very willful child. So that began my journey on trying to find other strategies that would reach her, because I didn't want to beat her to death. Okay. I didn't want to keep spanking. That was not working. I got tired of yelling. I'm not a yeller by nature anyway. So that was causing me a lot of stress and headaches and frustration. And so I really did a lot of reading and research on parenting. And that's what I want to share with you today. So one of the things that we often don't think about is, if my parenting isn't working, can I learn something new from a book, from a webcast, from a podcast like this, from somebody else because I want my children to grow up to be law-abiding, productive, tax-paying citizens who are not in my pocket, right?
Right.
That's the ultimate goal of parenting. And so parenting involves disciplining your children, which means shaping, molding and shaping their behavior in order for them to be as productive, as helpful, as healthy, mentally, physically, and sports-wise as possible. And so that's why it's important for us to have these conversations, because in the Black community, we use spanking, we use yelling, some folks may use timeout, but that's, that's probably about it in most people's parenting tool chest. And there are many, many more tools that you can use to help mold and shape your children.
Well, let's talk to some of the younger parents right now,
Mm-hmm.
because we have a dynamic in our community or communities where, unfortunately, although none of us come with instructions on how to parent, we recognize some of the ill mannerisms that parents may show to their children, especially out in public, that we know is not part of the handbook at all. 2-year-old little child crying, the parents cussing at them, come the F on, shut up, out in public, and just not ready. And, I've had conversations with people like, they're not meant to be parents, they shouldn't have any children, and things like that. But there are many young parents out there who are struggling. Perhaps their parents weren't quite there, maybe due to some substance abuse or things like that. So now they're struggling in a similar matter. Let's talk about that for a second.
So, yes, I remember I was at the gas station many years ago, and I could hear the lady, she was in a van next to me getting gas as well, and she was cussing. So she was fussing and cussing somebody up one side and down the other. I'm like, boy, her boyfriend is in trouble. Her husband said somebody did something they wasn't supposed to do, because she was reading them the riot act. And I put the gas back, the hose back in, and I just looked over, because I'm a counselor. I just checking for safety. I'm not going to interfere, but and it was children. She was yelling at children.
Mm-hmm.
So my first tip is take care of yourself, because oftentimes we yell out of frustration.
Right.
We have had it up to here. Maybe our day didn't go well. Maybe we're stressing about money. Maybe we're frustrated because the other parent is not pulling their weight, or kids can be frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
But the key in parenting is that one of the keys is that managing your stress and frustration and not acting out of your anger towards the child. People get in trouble when they spank or fuss in anger. I mean, you say things that you really didn't mean to say, and you do things out of anger that are too intense. And then, you can have some consequences for that. Mm-hmm. Young parents are probably highly frustrated because they have a lot of other dynamics that are part of the picture. Maybe there's not a lot of support, but we have to find a way to manage our own stress so that we are coming at our children with intention, okay?
Right.
The reason why we're trying to help these children to behave is that will help them in the future. One of the things that parents must do, in my opinion, is help their children learn how to obey. Because when you can follow instructions, that will help you in school, that will help you in life. All of us have somebody that we report to. Right. But getting back to your point, if young parents can figure out what is causing their own stress and deal with that, then they will be a little less frustrated and irritated when their child does something childish. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing, Omar, is I think that a lot of young parents don't know about child development. And so they expect their 2-year-old, their 3-year-old to do things that a 2-year-old and 3-year-old cannot do. There's a concept called readiness, and that has cognitive, brain, physical, and emotional components to it, and psychological. And we grow in all of those areas from the time we're born, actually from the time we're conceived until we die.
Mhm.
But each stage of development has its own readiness. And I think what happens a lot of times is parents expect their children to do something that their child is not ready to do.
Right.
And they get frustrated, and then that spills out onto them, onto the children.
Yeah, I've definitely seen where we as parents expect our children to be on the same level as us. Sometimes you sit back in amazement, like, yo, just relax a little bit. They're only 2, or they're only 5, or they're only 8. You know what I'm saying? It's like, stop putting so much pressure on them because you want them to act in a particular way. So did I tell you I had 10 children?
I think you did tell me that. So you've got quite a bit of experience.
And none of them are the same. None of them.
Yeah.
So each and every one of them you have to address in a particular way. You have to be diverse in your approach. And of course, I'm not perfect. I need some tips and things like that sometimes. But overall, I use the threatening method.
Yeah.
I might just put the belt up here, but I never really use it. I can't tell nobody. I got 5 of them. Can't let them know. But definitely each and every one of them are different. Some of them have these little sneaky ways, and just learning how to deal with that so they don't influence the others in a negative way. Is a real challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is part of the challenge of parenting, is that you parent differently based on each child's personality.
Right.
Because what happens is that one child will be afraid of X, but this other child over here will not be. So that threat doesn't work for that child.
Mm-hmm.
And so keeping all of that straight, and there's a way to keep it straight. So earlier in my career, I worked at a residential treatment facility for abused and neglected kids. I ran the school, the day treatment school, and we used what's called behavior modification. And that's a series of rewards for positive behavior. You want to feed the positive behavior, and consequences for negative behavior. So you want to what's called extinguish or reduce the negative behavior. So one parenting tip right off top is feeding the good behavior, paying attention to what your child is doing well, giving it lots of energy, and not going overboard. I'm not an advocate of everybody getting a trophy just because you all played the game.
Right.
There are winners and losers in life, and you have to learn how to deal with disappointment.
Right.
But when a child does something that you don't have to remind them of, when they clean their room, when they clean the bathroom, when they do a chore, when they do well in something around the house or something that you value, good job, Johnny. You know what? You did a good job. I'm so glad I didn't have to remind you. Doesn't that feel good? Don't you feel empowered? I mean, those are my words, but giving more attention to what the child is doing right, because you know what we do? We give a lot of attention to what they do wrong.
Right.
And when they do something right, oh, they're supposed to do that.
Right.
Well, that's true. That's true. But did you know, in the workforce, the number one reason that people leave a job is because they don't feel appreciated.
Yeah.
And so what I'm suggesting is that you want to grow the positive.
Okay.
All right, you want to grow the positive behavior, and the way that you do that is you compliment, you pay attention to it. Again, you don't have to go overboard, but you want to give, actually, according to research, we're supposed to give 5 compliments for every 1 negative correction, because correction has a lot of weight. If you think about it, most of us think about what somebody said about us that was bad. You know, what do other people think about us? What did I do wrong? We pay a lot of attention to the negative,
Right,
and we
right,
don't necessarily pay as much attention to the positive.
right. Absolutely. I appreciate that. It's a good reminder for myself.
Yeah.
Like I said, I have 5 little ones in outside my office here, and you can't hear them right now, so it being quiet. So I quiet enough anyway.
Well, be sure and compliment them. You know
Absolutely.
what, guys, I appreciate you all being quiet during my studio time. I mean, just, you could just mention it.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah.
uh, then I have a 14-year-old who thinks
Mhm.
I'm old. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yes. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm outdated. Those early adult, teenager years, they can be somewhat very, somewhat difficult, even more difficult than the smaller kids, because now they think they know everything. You can't tell them anything. So how do we approach that stage in life?
So there was a time when after I was in the residential treatment facility, I did that for 10 years, and then I did a lot of training for teachers on managing difficult behavior. And one of the things that I share with teachers and that I share with parents is, don't forget that you are the parent. Now, I know you're the parent, but sometimes when you're talking to a teenager, depending on what they say or do,
Right.
it can feel like they're trying to be your equal,
Mm-hmm.
and that is not the case. You are the parent. What you say goes. You have power, um, and you have to be consistent with teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
So teenagers are at a developmental stage where, yeah, they think they know everything because cognitively they're understanding more of how the world works, especially these days where kids have access to the internet. So they think they're more mature than what they really are. So when I say to you, be the parent, that means firmly establishing ground rules and sticking to them, because all children need structure. We actually all need structure. We resist structure, but we appreciate structure.
Right.
Okay. So by being the parent, what you're doing is, number one, remind yourself that your word is the last word.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to have discussions and conversations because teenagers like to debate, but they don't know everything. So even though they think they know everything, if you see them doing something or headed in a direction that is not a good direction, then it is upon you as the parent to set some boundaries to say, no, you need to be home by 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, or there are consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So in the teenage years, that is a good time to teach natural consequences. You left your homework at school. You want me to come and drop it off? Well, of course, we're in the pandemic, so everybody's homeschooled. But you want to use the car, but you came in after curfew yesterday? No, you can't use the car.
Mm-hmm.
So being firm in the teenage years, not rigid, but firm, is really, really important. And in my value system, to not tolerate disrespect. Um, Teenagers try to talk to you, or can make a mistake and talk to you in a way where it's like they telling you something, or talking back. And depending on how you handle that, I'm not going to suggest one way or the other, but whatever way you handle it, you need to establish that I am the parent. You need to respect me, and these are the rules of the house, and that's just how it is.
Okay, so I know about a few situations where now legally, of course, we're responsible for providing shelter for our children and the like, but you have some cases where you have a challenging child. It could be male or female.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a single parent home, or it could be, a marital home, but the child is very challenging in the sense of, physically challenging. You understand what I'm saying? So,
You mean physically challenging the parent, or
yeah, like
physically?
yeah, basically, I'm not doing that. What you gonna do? You know, and you know, what options, what advice would you have in those type of situations where you want, of course, you want to de-escalate the situation as best as possible, and while you're de-escalating, you want to de-escalate yourself.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
But
yeah.
those type of situations where you hear about them a lot, where the child is challenging the parent, and the parent has very few options. Perhaps they can't send them to another parent's home, or they can't send them to another relative's home. What do you do?
That's a tough situation. I've seen and heard about those kind of situations. My daughter was close to that, and we had to have a come to Jesus meeting. I would enlist the support of other folks in your community, whether that's in your family, your church family. Um, but you also want to look at, if does a child eat at your home? Do
Absolutely.
you cook and they eat?
Mm-hmm.
We are supposed to shelter and feed our children, but it doesn't say what we feed them. There's
Oh, I,
peanut butter and jelly. You can go make your own sandwich.
I do bread
I
water.
don't, yeah, I don't appreciate the disrespect. This is my house. You will need to abide by these rules. And again, it's when 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 children get to be a certain age and they're that oppositional
Mm-hmm.
to you, that is an indicator of, it could be immaturity. They could, they might just be full of themselves. But
Exterior influences.
yeah,
External
but
influences.
if you're paying for the phone,
Mm-hmm.
then take it away, because it is your phone, because you're paying the bill.
Right.
So those are some, I mean, you do have more leverage. You have some leverage, and you just got to figure out, okay, what am I willing to try to implement in order to get some cooperation.
Right. Right. So definitely, I've had a situation where one of my children, for example, said he wasn't doing any chores. I said, okay, no problem. You can't stay here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he had to go to his grandmother's house for a couple of weeks. And, he wanted to come back home. And I was asking him, all right, well, what you going to do different when you come back?
Mm-hmm.
And then, a mom wanted to was missing her baby and putting a little pressure on. But my thing is this not going to continue,
Yeah.
so
Because
definitely
what chores mean that you are contributing to the running of the household. Chores are not punishment, and chores aren't slave labor. The house needs to be clean, things need to be done. You live here. It is okay for you to participate in the running of this household by doing your part.
right. And I think I've heard this many times. We're living in a generation where all the children feel entitled.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're supposed to give me money. You're supposed to do this for me. You're supposed to drive me to my appointment instead of me catching public transportation. So sometimes you had a dynamic where one parent says no and the other parent says yes, and that causes
Mm-hmm.
some issues within the home where the child can manipulate the situation. So you
Yes.
want to touch on that for a minute?
Well, that again, like we talked about earlier, taking care of yourself
Mm-hmm.
is in managing your own stress. But it is more helpful for the parents to have a united front
Mm-hmm.
and take the issue behind closed doors and say, okay, how are we going to handle this? Because you think X and I think A. And you know, we have to come to some kind of agreement on how we're going to handle this, because children will split. It's called splitting, when they can manipulate between two parents and they go to one who is more compassionate. Oh, mom, you know, they go to mom, or usually it's mom with the tears. And then, well, mom said da da da. And after you've told him, no, you cannot do da da da.
Right.
So, but that's when, you know, the parents, it's helpful if the parents can come together. Now, if the parents can't come together, then that is problematic. And that's what happens a lot of times, especially in divorced couples, because y'all divorce because you can't get along. So, you know, that probably continues into the future. So that's a difficult situation. But if you can figure out how to talk about what is in the best interest of the child, with the idea that we are trying to shape and train our children in the way they should go.
Exactly.
So what is the best way to handle this situation, to train the child in the lesson that they need to learn? Natural consequences. If you do A, then B happens. If you leave your lunch, you're going to be hungry. So don't leave your, so you may have to be hungry in order to remember to take your lunch. Most of us learn our best lessons as adults because of the pain that we endured, and we said, I'm not doing that again because that was too painful.
Right.
We do learn through pain, not physical pain, but emotional pain as well.
Right. So we have about 3 minutes left before you have to go. What leave us something as far as a quick just a quick advice that you can give to us until our next meeting, and we'll focus on some other specificities of parenting. What can you leave us today with?
Well, I just want to say there's a myth out there that when you get 18, you're grown and my parenting is over. That is not true.
Right.
You are a parent for the rest of your life, because as long as your child is alive, you are a parent. Even into adulthood and old adulthood, we still revere and need our parents. So really looking at it from a long-term vantage point, which means that whatever struggle you're having now, it is not going to last always. Teenagers grow into young adults grow into adults. And so having a good relationship where you establish trust and respect, and it might just be RESPECT right now, where you need to learn how to respect me, respect this household, respect my rules. That may be the best lesson that you can teach children, because that will help them when they get to be adults and have to go out into the workplace. So each stage of our life, infancy, toddlerhood, school age, teenage, young adult,
Right.
adult, each stage of our life has different challenges and different parenting strategies that can work. You can actually build on them. So I just encourage you to be receptive and open to learning new parenting skills by doing reading, listening to other people, so that you can fill your toolbox with more than yelling, punishing, and spanking, because there are more tools that you can use, and that's what we'll talk about in each stage. And if you get it early, if you get them to comply early, you have a better chance of the teenage years not being so rocky. But that is part of the teenage years, is that tussling,
Right.
and that identity formation of who am I? And I find out who I am because I'm resisting you. So I'm trying to figure out how am I becoming an adult? Where do I stand?
All right. Okay, Ms. Moore, we appreciate you coming on today and blessing us with this advice. Hopefully we'll get our schedule down for our next showing on parenting.
Mhm.
And to the audience, thank you for coming. Like, subscribe, and share. And until next time, this is the Philly Old Head Review.
Bye-bye.
Bye.